Hi, this is Gary. Tonight I want to talk about a little bit about the midterm elections, the Judge Kavanaugh hearings, and the FISA abuse scandal. Now, the title of this message is The Rule of Lie. That's the title of the message, and I guess it's the title of this poem I wrote. I don't know if it's complete or not, but let me just read it to you. Pay attention to each word because as we go along with some of these facts that I'm going to bring out, I think they fit together very well. Also want to say that I have a crude word in this poem, the SHI word, just because, if you listen to it, I think there's no other way to say it. So, here it is, the rule of lie. We are a nation of lies, like living under the Lord of the Flies. These days, they barely bother to disguise. They know the sheeple will eat the shit. The Mueller infestation is an abuse of power operation, covering up an abuse of power operation production in the living propaganda theater. So, with that in mind, I want to talk a little bit about the midterm elections and what I thought I saw there. I remember in the last debate of the 2016 campaign where Trump was asked if he would accept the results of the election, because everybody thought he was going to lose, and they thought that he would try to contest the election. Because on the campaign trail, he had been talking about the well-known voter fraud perpetrated by the DNC over the years. So he said something to the effect, I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. I'll have to look at it, see what happened there. And Hillary Rodham Clinton immediately responded that this was horrifying, turning on the political indignation. But what did we see in the midterms? I don't think in the Georgia governor race, I don't think Stacey Abrams still has not conceded that race. I believe there was voter fraud in the midterm elections. Obviously, Florida was a disaster again. What happened in Orange County, California, and some other places? I think there was some funny business going on. So can we trust our election system? I don't know. Probably not. Was there fraud in the 2018 midterms? Probably. Was it perpetrated by the DNC if there was fraud? I'd be willing to bet everything I have that if an objective, honest investigation were done, DNC fraud would probably at least be 10-1 over RNC fraud. Now, don't take it the wrong way. I'm not defending the Republican Party. The only greater force for evil and stupidity in the world than the Republican Party is the Democrat Party. Now, when it came to the Judge Kavanaugh hearings and the FISA abuse, these are, in my opinion, two examples of brazen political fraud and media-assisted propaganda. So if you remember, Justice Kavanaugh was accused of sexual assault, accused by Christine Blasey Ford of sexual assault at a high school party 36 years ago. A vicious accusation with no corroboration and no evidence. I remember at the time so many people said they found Blasey Ford, quote, credible. Well, I didn't find her credible. If you do, that's fine. I didn't, and I don't. To me, it was obviously a political hit job. Now, we know the tactic of the media and others is to, whenever you oppose somebody in that kind of situation, you're going to be called a sexist. Or if it was a African American person, you'd be called a racist or another, any race. They're always going to use the sexist, racist, homophobe cards. But, I don't play along with that. I look at people as human beings. I don't care what gender they are. I mean, these things do factor in, and they do have influence. But when it comes to factual matters, it doesn't matter the gender or the color of a person. Let's look at the facts. And when it came to the Blasey Ford accusations, as I said, there was no corroboration, no evidence. What are you going to do? So, and just the way it all played out, obviously a political hit. And then when it comes to the FISA abuse scandal, we are talking about the mother of all political hit jobs. But it's far more than that. This is how brazen the Democrat Party has become in their will to power by any means necessary. They paid millions of dollars for the concoction of a story, or as everyone likes to say now, a narrative. The Steele dossier, which in his testimony this weekend, former FBI Director James Comey apparently stated that the dossier is still unverified. As he said in June 2017 testimony, Comey described the information in the Steele dossier as salacious and unverified. We know from former FBI Deputy Director Andy McCabe testimony, who has also been fired from the FBI. He told Congress that the Bureau tried very hard to verify Steele's information, but could provide no points of verification beyond the fact that Page did travel to Russia in July 2016, a fact that required no effort to corroborate since the trip was unconcealed and widely known. Page delivered a public commencement address at the New Economics School. Furthermore, in British legal proceedings, Steele himself has described the information he provided to the FBI as raw intelligence, quote, that was, quote, unverified. This information comes from a July 23, 2018 column in National Review by former federal prosecutor Andy McCarthy. I would highly recommend that you find and read that column because he gives people like me with no legal or police background a peek behind the curtain. This is some technical stuff, but McCarthy does a great job of making it understandable. And so it's a very important, this column, I believe. What he lays out basically is that the FBI did not verify the document, but they presented it to the FISC court, the FISA court. FISC is a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. It was stamped verified application, and it was used to spy on an American citizen, and through this citizen to spy on the Trump presidential campaign. That, folks, is third world police state garbage. Dangerous. It is a all-out assault on the Constitution. And I will be very curious to get more information on the FISA court's reactions to this. Obviously, a fraud was perpetrated on the FISA court. And ever since all this stuff has begun to come to light, I've wondered, what was the role of the FISA court? Were they just completely duped? Were any of them in on it? I mean, the whole government was in on it. Why not the FISA court too? I mean, it goes all the way from Brennan and the CIA, and he got it to Harry Reid, a Nevada senator, and John McCain was in on it from the beginning, and it appears that this went through the entire U.S. government, and obviously this was during the Obama administration. And do you really think President Obama was not aware of all of this? Of course he was. Of course he was. Now, In the text between Agent Strzok and Page of the FBI, I'm sure you folks are familiar with many of those texts. There was one of them that did discuss, made a reference to U.S. District Judge Rudolph Contreras, who was on the Fisk court. So that really needs to be investigated, I would say. So I'd like to talk about this FISA scandal against the backdrop of James Comey's testimony last Friday before the Judiciary Committee. The transcription was released Saturday. I've read a lot of it. I want to discuss some of the things that stood out to me. On page 4, or actually in early pages, I'm not sure if it's page 4, but Comey said that 4 people were investigated. So we know about Carter Page, obviously, who was named in the FISA warrant that has been released, much of it heavily redacted. There is some information there available. Carter Page is explicitly called an agent of the Russian government in that document. And yet he goes about as a free man to this day. And I hope he sues the U.S. government and gets a lot of money, because they accused him of being a Russian spy, and he was not. If he was, they would have nailed him to the wall. They got a surveillance warrant on him, for crying out loud. They knew everything he was doing. If they had the slightest bit of evidence, they would have taken him down. So of the other 4, we have to assume Papadopoulos is one. Papadopoulos, I listened to a very interesting interview he did with Dan Bongino. I think it was about maybe 3 weeks ago. I think it was before he did his 2-week stint in federal prison for lying to FBI investigators, because they probably twisted him into a pretzel, because they're experts at that. And they got him to inadvertently lie, probably, is how that played out. Which is what it sounds and what Jerome Corsi is accusing them of doing, and he has brought a lawsuit. I just heard about this tonight, a $350 million lawsuit against, and its name's Mueller, and it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Anyways, in his interview with Dan Bongino, Papadopoulos really lays out a case that he was set up. He was approached by multiple spies, and he was even lured into a hotel room in Greece by what he believes now is a spy. And he became very nervous. Things had changed in his relationship with this person. At first he was very friendly, seemed very helpful. But then in this particular encounter, Papadopoulos got really bad vibes. And the guy gave him $10,000 in cash. Well, Papadopoulos was afraid to not take the money, So he takes the money, he gets out of that situation, and then what he did the next day was he hired a lawyer in Greece, gave him the money, and, gave him a description of all that had gone on and how he came to have that money. He also contacted the person that gave him the money and said, he contacted him the next day and said, "Do not contact me again." He knew there was something fishy going on. And then when Papadopoulos came back to the States, as soon as he got off the plane in New York, federal agents were there to meet him. They wanted to talk to him. So very suspicious things going on there. So again, I highly recommend finding the interview with Papadopoulos and Dan Bongino. There's a lot of information there, very interesting. Now, those that are familiar with the Papadopoulos case will remember that he was told of the existence of a damaging Hillary Clinton email file by a Maltese professor named Joseph Mifsud. Papadopoulos later ended up in a meeting with Alexander Downer, a former foreign minister of Australia, who happens to be a donor to the Clinton Foundation to the tune of $25 million. So Papadopoulos ends up in a meeting with Downer. It was portrayed in the media as Papadopoulos got all liquored up in a London bar, and he spilled to Downer that the Trump campaign had all these stolen emails from the Clinton campaign, and then Downer reported that, I think, to the Australian government, and then it went from there. And so Papadopoulos says that whole thing, everything about him in this whole situation was a setup from first to last. And hey, if you listen to that interview, I believe him. And, listen to him in the interview and research some of the information out there about this whole case. And I think you'll come away believing him. I mean, we know about Operation Crossfire Hurricane, where spies were implanted into the Trump campaign. And so if they did it, then why wouldn't they do it to Papadopoulos? Papadopoulos is, it's said that people that want to de-emphasize the Steele dossier because they know how damaging it is, because it shows their total fraudulent intentions. So they've tried to use the Papadopoulos case as to say that this was the real beginning of the Russia investigation, because that's really the problem. Where did it begin? Why did it begin? Why would you take the extraordinary step of spying on an American political presidential campaign? So they better have a damn good reason for that. And so far it's looking like they don't. So Comey said 4 people were investigated. Who are the other 2? I guess most people are saying Flynn and Manafort. And, I think that you can kind of look at, say that that's correct. It's those 4. Well, you can see why they were targeted. Or at least when it comes to Page, he was trying to get into energy business in Russia, and so he had traveled back and forth from Russia. Manafort had the Ukrainian connections. He was a lobbyist. So I think they were targeted for those reasons. So let's go back to the text of this testimony of Comey on Friday, December 7th. The questioning was started by Trey Gowdy of South Carolina, and he really pressed right from the beginning the text between Strzok and Page that demonstrated just incredible bias. And Gowdy pressed Comey on the bias of Strzok and Page, but Comey would not admit the obvious. And Comey even used the situation where on October 28th, 2016, when, you remember, right before the vote, 12 days before the election, this came out that there were some of Hillary Clinton's emails found on Anthony Weiner's server. And so Comey made a public announcement that he was reopening the case. Well, he says that Strzok drafted the letter reopening that case. And So Comey tried to use this in this testimony to show how Strzok was not biased. But obviously they had no choice. They sat on that, they had that laptop and sat on it for a month. And apparently the NYPD said, if you don't deal with this, we will. And so they had to come out with that news. By the way, it turns out that this testimony was not under oath and it was in an unclassified setting. So I guess Comey was right. He could have just done it in public. So here's another example. Now, I do not understand why. Maybe there's a good reason why the Republicans are just spineless weenies, that they never seem to be able to get what they want. They talk all tough like they're going to force them to do this and that. But in the end, Comey sat there, and if you read this transcript, I mean, it's just a disgrace. It was like trying to read a bowl of Jell-O. Comey is a blatant liar. He denies any knowledge of anything, and yet he signed the initial FISA warrant and 2 of the renewals, and yet any specific question regarding the FISA warrant, he didn't know, he couldn't recall, which has become infamous already. I think there was somebody added it all up, and there was 240 times he said that he didn't know. But he had a totally different attitude and sung a different tune when questioned by the Democrats on the committee. Now listen to this from page 88 of the transcript. He's being questioned by Nadler, who is one of the incoming congressional leaders of the new majority of the Democrat Party. He says to Comey, on page 88 of your book, A Higher Loyalty. This is the title of Comey's book. A Higher Loyalty, Truth, Lies, and Leadership. And it talks about how an interaction between Comey and Bob Mueller. In the first full paragraph, you wrote, quote, Mueller and I were not particularly close and never seen each other outside of work, but I knew Bob and understood and respected our legal position and cared deeply about the rule of law. You know what? Comey, this is like one of Comey's favorite phrases, the rule of law. And that's why I titled this message, The Rule of Lie, because you know what happens in Washington, D.C.? These people attain to a place above the law. Now, it remains to be seen. I think Comey's going down, but he's been above the law for a long time. He would have stayed above the law if the most famous above the law person in the world, Hillary Clinton, would have won the presidency. But what these people do is they attain a position above the law, and then they use the law as a weapon against their political opponents. It's disgusting. And you know what's really disgusting about it is Comey to me comes across as like the most sanctimonious person ever. He's just, to me, he looks like he thinks that he's some kind of modern Abe Lincoln character. But in reality, he's nothing but a lying dog who has disgraced the FBI and is a key figure and a central player in the most widespread abuse of power probably this country has ever seen. I've always hated false piety. Before I was a Christian, and especially after I became a Christian. And Comey is just full of false piety and self-righteousness and sanctimony. And I really pray that he gets what's coming to him. Justice must be done, not only with him, but with everybody involved in this travesty. And so I guess my point is with the title, they're always proclaiming about the rule of law, but it's really the rule of lie. Comey is lying through his teeth in this congressional testimony. And as I look through this transcript, I see many other places where the rule of law is referred to. It's just a great example of just the blatant, disgusting hypocrisy. And people talk about this all the time. Oh, there's hypocrisy and a double standard, and we have dual justice systems. Well, when are we going to do something about it? I mean, what is the Republican Party doing about it to protect us from these power-mad maniacs who would go to these lengths to take down a presidential candidate and then a president? Even after he became president, they were using this as a weapon, obviously, with the institution of Mueller as a special counsel. So the whole thing is it's the big lie of our American history, I think. Apparently, it may come out that the United Kingdom and Australia were involved helping the American deep state against Trump. We'll see how that plays out. As I said, it went permeated throughout the government, from the director of the CIA to the National Intelligence Director Clapper, FBI Director Comey, all the Secretary of State John Kerry. There's going to be a lot coming out about his involvement in this whole thing. So with all this in mind, I want to read this passage from the Gospel of John. John chapter 8, verses 31 through 47. Jesus is being interrogated by the Jewish religious leaders who are always harassing him. Jesus was saying to those Jews who had believed him, "If you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." They answered him, "We are Abraham's descendants and have never yet been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say you will become free?" Jesus answered them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who commits sin is the slave of sin. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The son does remain forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. I know that you are Abraham's descendants, yet you seek to kill me, because my word has no place in you. I speak the things which I have seen with my Father. Therefore, you also do the things which you heard from your father." They answered and said to him, "Abraham is our father." Jesus said to them, "If you are Abraham's children, do the deeds of Abraham. But as it is, you are seeking to kill me, a man who has told you the truth, which I heard from God. This Abraham did not do. You are doing the deeds of your father." They said to him, "We are not born of fornication. We have one Father, God." Jesus said to them, "If God were your Father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and have come from God. For I have not even come on my own initiative, but he sent me. Why do you not understand what I am saying? It is because you cannot hear my word. You are of your father, the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. Whenever he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own nature, for he is a liar and the father of lies. But because I speak the truth, you do not believe me. Which one of you convicts me of sin? If I speak truth, why do you not believe me? He who is of God hears the words of God. For this reason, you do not hear them, because you are not of God. So Jesus here says that Satan is the father of lies. Now, we're talking a lot about lies and deception here, and how, from what I've seen in my lifetime living in America, I've never seen an atmosphere like this where lies and deception are so prevalent. Just never seen it before. It's not like it was, happening before and we didn't notice. It's never been this bad. It's never been like this. Now, lying is a sin, and we've all practiced it. I've lied. Trump has lied. But this is a wholly other level of lying. Taking the intelligence community of the United States, in a conspiracy to push a fraudulent intelligence report, knowing it's a fraud. Oh, forgot to mention that there are reports. John Solomon reported last week, and John Solomon he's the one that started unraveling this whole thing. He's been on it from the beginning. Nobody knows it better than him. But he reported last week that there are some internal FBI emails that show beyond doubt that they knew that their FISA application was a total fraud, and Comey's name is all over that email chain, apparently. So this is something that's still classified, hasn't been released, but people have seen it and have reported on it. So hopefully that will be coming out soon. So yeah, you've got the leaders of all our institutions and government entities, State Department, CIA, Director of National Intelligence, and as I said before, this could not have escaped the knowledge of Obama himself. I'm not trying, and then when you bring what people call religion into politics, people accuse you of demonizing your political opponents. Well, as I said with Sean yesterday when we were recording our Made Alive message, they're doing a pretty good job of that themselves. So I guess what I'm saying is, and I'm not solely blaming the Democrats. I know there's plenty of evil Republicans too, no question about it. But let's just say our U.S. government is perpetrating a huge lie in many different ways. Look what they did with Kavanaugh, vicious lies. Look at the voter fraud, and look at this fraud of this FISA warrant to attempt to bring down the president. So I guess what I'm saying, in my view, is that America is under a demonic influence like never before, and we as believers in Christ had better be praying every day for our government, for our president, and for our society, because we cannot continue down this lawless path. If you recall, one of the names of the Antichrist in the New Testament is the man of lawlessness. That's something that I'm going to be exploring as I continue to make these recordings. So I hope that you will tune in again. Thank you for listening. Good night.